The wrench slipped from my oil-slicked fingers, clattering against the cobblestones like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon haze, and that's when I saw her, leaning against the rusted gate of the villa, arms crossed, watching me with eyes that held the weight of forgotten summers. "You think you can just fix what's broken and walk away?" Her voice sliced through the air, low and laced with something sharper than salt from the Mediterranean spray. I straightened up, heart slamming against my ribs, because in that moment, I knew the engine under Sophia's hood was the least of what I'd unwittingly tampered with. Spain had never felt like home, not really, not with its relentless sun baking the earth into submission and the Sirocco winds whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. I'd come here 2 years ago on a whim, fleeing the flatline predictability of a Kansas garage job and a girlfriend who'd ghosted me mid-sentence, leaving behind nothing but a half-empty coffee mug and a post-it note that said, "Sorry." Andalusia was supposed to be my reset, olive groves stretching like green veins across the hills, whitewashed villages clinging to cliffs, and enough freelance mechanic gigs to keep the wanderlust at bay. Sophia, my neighbor in the cramped apartment block on the edge of Ronda, had become the closest thing to an anchor, a 22-year-old firecracker with a laugh like shattering glass and a beat-up Fiat that wheezed like an asthmatic chainsmoker. That morning, she'd banged on my door at dawn, wild-eyed and frantic. "Jade. The damn thing won't start. Aunt Ivy's picking me up in 2 hours for that family thing in Malaga, and if I'm late again, she'll skin me alive." Sophia's aunt, the enigmatic Ivy, whispered about in our little expat circle like some faded Hollywood starlet who'd washed up on these shores. I'd heard the stories. Ivy Navarro, 42, American by birth but Spanish by blood, a painter who'd traded Manhattan galleries for a crumbling finca inherited from her late mother. Widowed young, they said, from a husband who'd vanished into the ether, leaving her to raise Sophia's mom alone until cancer claimed her too. Now Ivy was the reluctant guardian, shuttling Sophia between art school in Seville and family obligations that sounded more like indentured servitude. I grumbled but grabbed my toolkit, because that's what friends do in places where the word family gets thrown around like confetti at a funeral. The Fiat was a mess, timing belt frayed, spark plugs fouled, the whole underbelly screaming neglect. I spent the next 3 hours on my back in the gravel driveway, sweat stinging my eyes, cursing in a mix of English and the Spanglish I'd picked up from locals. By noon, the engine purred like a contented cat, and Sophia planted a sloppy kiss on my cheek before peeling out toward the highway, her ponytail whipping like a flag in surrender. That's when Ivy appeared. Not with fanfare, but like she'd materialized from the heat shimmer rising off the blacktop. She was taller than I'd imagined, all lean lines and quiet command, her dark hair threaded with silver that caught the light like veins of quartz. A loose white blouse billowed around her, tucked into high-waisted pants that spoke of old money and older heartaches, and on her wrist, a thin gold bracelet that dangled like a question mark. "You must be the miracle worker," she said, her voice carrying that transatlantic lilt, Midwest roots softened by years in Europe. Her eyes, deep brown and unreadable, flicked from the Fiat's hood to my face, lingering just a beat too long. I wiped my hands on a rag, suddenly hyper-aware of the grease under my nails and the tank top clinging to my skin. Jade. Just Jade. Sophia's car was one bad pothole away from the scrapyard. I tried for casual, but my voice came out rough, like I'd swallowed gravel. She smiled then, not the polite curve of lips, but something real, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "I'm Ivy. And you've saved me a headache. Come up to the house. Least I can do is offer you a cold drink before you vanish back into whatever cave you mechanics hide in." It wasn't a question, more an invitation wrapped in expectation, and before I knew it, I was following her up the winding path to the finca, toolkit slung over my shoulder like a shield. The villa was a time capsule, stucco walls faded to the color of old bones, terracotta roof tiles missing in patches like gaps in a grin. Bougainvillea clawed at the arches, vibrant pinks and purples against the unrelenting white, and inside, the air was cool and shadowed, scented with lemon verbena and linseed oil from half-finished canvases stacked in corners. Ivy poured us glasses of Tinto de Verano from a clay jug, red wine spiked with lemon soda, fizzing like secrets on the tongue, and we settled on the terrace overlooking the gorge. Ronda's Puente Nuevo spanned the void below, a stone scar against the sky, and for a while, we talked about nothing, the tourists who treated the town like a postcard, the way the wind carved faces into the cliffs. But Ivy had a way of steering conversations, subtle as a brushstroke. Sophia says you're from the States. Kansas, right? What brings a girl like you to a place that's equal parts paradise and purgatory? Her gaze was steady, probing without pressure, and I found myself spilling more than I'd intended, the dead-end job, the girlfriend who decided our 5 years were a phase, the ache of waking up to silence in a too-big apartment. Spain's good for phases, she murmured, swirling her glass. It lets you shed skins you didn't know were too tight. There was a shadow in her words, a flicker of something personal, but she waved it off with a laugh. Me? I came back after Mom died. Thought I'd bury myself in paint and pretend the world's not spinning off its axis. We lingered until the sun dipped low, painting the olives in molten gold, and when I finally stood to leave, she pressed a small canvas into my hands, a sketch of the gorge, quick lines capturing the wildness I'd only glimpsed. For the fixer of broken things, she said, and her fingers brushed mine, warm and deliberate, sending a jolt straight to my core. That night, I lay awake in my stuffy flat, the canvas propped against the wall like an accusation. Ivy Navarro wasn't just Sophia's aunt, she was a gravitational pull, the kind that upends compasses. And I, fool that I am, was already charting a course straight into the storm. The days blurred after that, a haze of routine gigs, tuning up a landlord's Vespa, coaxing life into a tourist's rental SUV, but Ivy lingered like the aftertaste of that Tinto, sharp and insistent. Sophia dragged me to the finca for Sunday lunches, claiming it was tradition, but her grin said otherwise. She'd vanish into the kitchen with excuses about helping with dishes, leaving me alone with Ivy on the terrace, where conversations unfurled like the jasmine vines climbing the trellis. We talked art, mostly at first, her bold abstracts born from grief, swirls of cobalt and crimson that screamed what words couldn't. I'd never been one for galleries, my world was torque wrenches and oil filters, the satisfying click of parts aligning. But Ivy made me see the poetry in it. Fixing's an art too, she'd say, sketching idly on a napkin while I rambled about a stubborn carburetor. You're piecing souls back together, one bolt at a time. Her compliments landed soft, but they burrowed deep, stirring something dormant, a hunger for connection that Kansas had starved out of me. One evening, as cicadas buzzed their electric hymn, she invited me into her studio. It was a sunlit room at the villa's heart, easels like sentinels around a scarred wooden table strewn with pigments and half-empty wine bottles. I need a model's eye, she lied, I think, gesturing to a blank canvas. Tell me what you see when you look at this. I stood there, awkward in my work boots, describing chaos, a storm-tossed sea, perhaps, or the raw edge of loss. She painted as I spoke, her brush moving with a fury that matched the fire in her eyes, and when she stepped back hours later, the canvas held not my words, but us, entwined figures against a fractured horizon, tentative and alive. That was the night it shifted. The air thickened as she cleaned her brushes, her shoulder brushing mine in the narrow space. Jade, she said, voice husky from disuse, you make me remember what it's like to feel unmoored. Her hand found my cheek, thumb tracing the line of my jaw, and I leaned in, heart a wild drum, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of turpentine and truth. It was slow, exploratory, lips parting like petals in dawn light, her fingers threading through my hair, pulling me closer until the world narrowed to the heat between us. No rush, no demands, just the quiet unraveling of guards we'd both worn too long. After, we sat on the studio floor, backs against the wall, sharing a blanket and stories in the dark. Ivy spoke of her marriage, not with bitterness, but clarity. He was safe, you know. A professor from Columbia, all tweed and tenure. But safe's a slow poison. She'd loved women before, in fleeting college summers, but life had barreled on, family expectations, her mother's illness, the finca's debts piling like autumn leaves. I buried it. Buried me. Her voice cracked, and I held her then, fierce and wordless, vowing silently to unearth what time had stolen. Sophia noticed, of course. "You're glowing, chica," she teased one afternoon, elbow deep in a bowl of gazpacho at the finca's kitchen table. "Aunt Ivy's got that effect, huh? Don't break her heart, she's got enough cracks." I laughed it off, but unease prickled. Sophia idolized Ivy, saw her as the unyielding oak in their fractured family tree. What would she make of this? Of me, the grease monkey outsider, staking claim to the woman who'd raised her mother? Weeks turned to a rhythm, stolen mornings in the groves, where we'd walk hand in hand under the olives, her head on my shoulder as she pointed out constellations in the leaves. Picnics on the cliffs, where she'd read poetry, Federico Garcia Lorca's Gypsy Laments, and I'd counter with Springsteen lyrics, our laughter echoing off the gorge. Ivy opened up about the betrayal that had scarred her deepest, not her husband's leaving, but her sister's. Sophia's mom, Elena, had fled to America young, pregnant and ashamed, leaving Ivy to shoulder their mother's care alone. She promised to send money, to come back. But letters dried up, and then nothing. Just silence. Ivy's eyes would cloud, and I'd pull her close, whispering that some wounds heal crooked but hold. Yet cracks formed, subtle as hairlines in porcelain. Ivy's ex-Galleria contacts from Madrid started calling, persistent, oily voices on the villa's ancient landline, urging her to sell. The finca was sinking under repairs, roof leaks, crumbling foundations, the weight of inheritance. "It's just pieces," she'd say, waving off my concerns. "Tourists would pay a fortune for views like this." But her sketches grew darker, canvases slashed with black, and I'd find her pacing at midnight, staring at deeds spread across the table like a losing hand. One night, after a particularly brutal call, we argued, our first. "You're not seriously thinking of selling?" I pressed, voice rising over the clink of our glasses. The terrace was moonlit, the gorge a black maw below. "It's not that simple, Jade." Ivy's tone sharpened, defensive. "This place is a vampire, sucking me dry. Sophia's future, my sanity. I have to think practical." "Practical? This is your soul. The groves, the studio, it's you." Heat flushed my cheeks, I hated how American I sounded, all individualism and heart overhead. She laughed, brittle. "And what do you know of souls chained to stone? You drift, Jade, fix and flee. But me? I'm rooted here, rotting." The words landed like slaps, and I stormed out, the gate slamming behind me. In my flat, I punched the wall until knuckles bled, cursing the fool I'd become, hooked on a woman whose walls were higher than Rhonda's bridges. Days passed in radio silence. Sophia texted cryptic warnings, "Aunt's in a mood." "What did you do?" I threw myself into work, ignoring the ache, until a frantic call shattered the standoff. Ivy's voice, small and shattered, the studio. "Fire. Come quick." I raced to the finca, heart in throat, arriving to chaos, sirens wailing, neighbors in robes gawking as bomberos battled flames licking the villa's east wing. Ivy stood apart, soot-streaked and hollow-eyed, clutching a singed sketchbook. "Electrical," she whispered when I pulled her into my arms. "Lost half the canvases. But you came." We collapsed on the terrace steps, her head on my lap as dawn broke, and in the wreckage, something solidified. "I'm not selling," she vowed, fingers laced with mine. "Not while there's breath in me." Relief flooded me, but so did fear. This fire was a sign, the universe's cruel nudge toward change. Little did I know, the real blaze was yet to come. Summer crested like a fever, the Andalusian heat pressing down until even the cicadas faltered. The fire left scars, charred beams in the studio, the acrid ghost of smoke haunting every room. Ivy rebuilt with a vengeance, hauling supplies from town in her ancient Renault while I welded reinforcements, our hands brushing in the dust like old lovers reuniting. We were careful now, the argument a fresh bruise, but the tenderness deepened, nights tangled in her bed, bodies mapping each other with whispers and sighs, the world reduced to the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. Sophia, bless her oblivious heart, played matchmaker without knowing. You two are like those old movies Aunt Ivy loves, gritty and gorgeous, she'd say, shoving plates of paella our way at communal dinners. Her presence grounded us, a reminder of the stakes. Ivy doted on her niece, funding art supplies from meager sales, dreaming aloud of Sophia's Seville exhibition. She's got my fire, but none of the ash, Ivy confided one twilight, as we watched Sophia sketch by the pool, her pencil flying like a bird in flight. But shadows lengthened. The calls from Madrid persisted, now laced with urgency, developers circling the finca like vultures, offering sums that could fund Sophia's dreams and Ivy's escape. Just to consult, Ivy promised, but her absences grew, late nights in town, returning with takeout and evasion. I'd find her in the studio at odd hours, staring at a particular canvas, a portrait of two women, backs turned, one stepping into shadow. Old ghosts, she'd mutter, but her eyes dodged mine. Doubt crept in, insidious as rust. Was I just a distraction, a rebound from flames and failures? My own past echoed, the girlfriend who'd left because you love engines more than people. I buried it in work, taking overflow jobs in Marbella, but the drives through cork oak forests only amplified the isolation. Spain, for all its beauty, felt vast and unforgiving, a land of siestas and sorrows, where expats like me were perpetual outsiders. The breaking point came in early September, the air still thick but edged with autumn's bite. Sophia burst into my flat unannounced, face streaked with tears. She's selling, Jade. The finca, everything. Some big shot from Barcelona swooped in with a check, and Aunt Ivy. She signed. Her words tumbled out, raw and ragged. I overheard her on the phone last night. Said it was for my future, tuition, a fresh start. But it's home. Our home. Numb, I drove to the villa, the gorge blurring past like a watercolor smear. Ivy was on the terrace, papers spread before her, a glass of wine untouched. She looked up, surprise melting into guilt. Sophia told you. You were going to just let it happen. Without a word. My voice cracked, betrayal a bitter flood. All those nights, the promises, not while there's breath in me. Was that bullshit too? Her face crumpled, hands trembling as she gathered the documents. It's not that simple. The fire ate the insurance payout, and the bank's breathing down my neck. Sophia's school. Sophia's school. Or your escape hatch. The accusation hung, ugly and true. In the heat of it, fragments spilled, my paranoia about being a placeholder, her deflection about Elena's abandonment mirroring this choice. You're running, Ivy. Just like she did. Leaving ghosts for the next fool to chase. She recoiled as if struck. You think this is easy? Selling the only piece of mom I have left. But love isn't a fairy tale, it pays bills, buries the dead. Her voice rose, then broke. And you waltz in, fix what's cracked, but what about when the foundation's gone? You're free, Jade. I envy that. But me? I'm tethered. The fight escalated, words as weapons, my youth called reckless naivety, her caution, cowardice cloaked in duty. I hurled the wrench from my toolkit at the wall, it embedded in the stucco with a thud, inches from her head, and stormed out, tires screeching on the gravel as I fled to Rhonda's old town. Bars blurred into one, sangria burning my throat, until a local dragged me home at dawn. Waking to regret, I found Ivy's note slipped under my door, a sketch of the two of us, hands outstretched across a chasm, captioned, "Forgive the fractures." But pride walled me in. Days stretched to a week, Sophia mediating with pleading texts, "She's a mess. Talk to her." I resisted, until a package arrived, my toolkit, cleaned and oiled, wrapped in brown paper with a letter. Jade, it read, Ivy's script elegant loops. I tore it up. The contract. The finca stays. But you. I can't fix us alone. If you're willing, meet me at the Gorge Bridge. Midnight. No tools, just truth. Heart pounding, I went. The Puente Nuevo loomed, moon-silvered and eternal, wind whipping my jacket as I waited. Ivy arrived on foot, silhouette against the stars, her face pale but resolute. I lied, she confessed, voice carrying over the abyss. Not about the sale, about why. Elena didn't just leave, she took everything. The savings, Mom's jewelry, even the Finca's title for a spell, gambling it away in Vegas. I clawed it back, but the shame. It poisoned me. Made me think I had to protect it all, alone. Tears tracked her cheeks, and mine joined them. I thought you were using me, to patch the holes until you could bolt. Never. She stepped closer, the chasm at our feet a metaphor too on the nose. You unearthed me, Jade. Showed me roots can entwine, not just bind. Our embrace bridged the gap, fierce and forgiving, lips meeting under the indifferent moon. It wasn't resolution, wounds like ours scar, not vanish, but in that kiss, possibility bloomed. Yet fate, that capricious painter, had one more stroke. October arrived with rains that turned the groves to mud, washing clean the summer's sins. Ivy and I rebuilt, not just the studio, new skylights admitting hesitant light, but each other, brick by tentative brick. Mornings became ours, coffee on the terrace, her sketching while I tinkered with the Renault, our silences companionable, laced with the easy touch of lovers who knew the map of mercy. Sophia, ever the optimist, dubbed us the unbreakable duo, her relief palpable as she prepped for her exhibition, Ivy's pride a quiet flame. But peace is fragile in Andalusia, where history layers like phyllo dough, thin, prone to tearing. The betrayal I'd sensed. It wasn't Ivy's alone. One drizzling afternoon, as I sorted canvases in the attic, a box tumbled from a rafter, letters, yellowed and bundled, postmarked from Reno. Elena's handwriting, frantic loops confessing debts, pleas for forgiveness. Tucked inside, a deed, half-signed, dated a decade back, with a notary's seal from Malaga. My stomach nodded. Ivy had mentioned the clawback, but this? It reeked of forgery, the kind that could unravel everything. Confrontation loomed, but curiosity won. I drove to town, rain sluicing the windshield, and visited the old notary, Senor Vargas, a wizened chainsmoker with files like ancient tomes. Navarro. Ah, see, the sister's shadow. He puffed, scanning microfiche under a flickering lamp. The transfer. Irregular. Forged, they said at the time. Dropped when Elena vanished for good. But whispers. Ivy paid to bury it deep. Back at the finca, Ivy was in the kitchen, chopping onions with mechanical precision, tears she could blame on the blade. What did you find? She asked, not looking up, as if she'd known I'd dig. The letters. The deed. I laid it out, voice steady despite the quake inside. You forged it. To keep the finca from her. She set the knife down, hands trembling. Not forged, amended. Elena signed half, drunk and desperate, then bolted. Mom was dying, I couldn't lose this too. Her eyes met mine, raw. I paid Vargas to correct the record. €1,000 I didn't have, borrowed from a gallery advance. It was survival, Jade. Not greed. Betrayal twisted anew, not just the act, but the secrecy, a vault between us. You could have told me. Trusted me. Words failed, I paced, rain drumming the roof like accusations. This could destroy you. Sophia. If it comes out, fraud, jail. It won't. Ivy's voice sharpened, desperation edging it. It's buried. Elena's gone, cancer, 5 years back. I found out from a cousin, too late for goodbyes. She sank into a chair, head in hands. I carried it alone because that's what I do. Protect what's mine. The argument reignited, fiercer than before, my American bluntness clashing with her Iberian stoicism. Protection. It's poison. Secrets rot from the inside. I hurled the deed at the table, it skidded into the sink, ink bleeding like wounds. Is this us? Patched lies over open gashes. She rose, fire in her eyes. And you? The drifter who fixes cars but runs from roots. Hypocrite. The word stung, true in its mirror. We shouted until voices hoarsed, until Sophia burst in from school, umbrella dripping, eyes wide. Stop. Both of you, enough. In the stunned silence, truth cascaded. Ivy confessed the full weight. Elena's gambling had stripped them bare, her abandonment a double betrayal, leaving Ivy not just parentless, but penniless. The forgery was a desperate bid to salvage the finca, a home that held their mother's laugh in every tile. Sophia, hearing it all, didn't recoil. You did it for us, she whispered, hugging Ivy fierce. For me, even before I was born. The room shifted then, accusations dissolving into exhaustion. We three sat late into the night, rain a lullaby, weaving the fractured tale into something whole. No heroes, just humans, flawed, fierce, forgiving. I held Ivy's hand under the table, her pulse a steady Morse, I'm here. Climax crested the next week, at Sophia's exhibition in Seville. The gallery hummed, critics in crisp suits, locals sipping cava, canvases glowing under spotlights. Ivy's pieces flanked her niece's, abstracts of fire and rebirth, mine woven in subtly, a wrench's curve in a lover's hip, the gorgeous bridge as a spine. Whispers rippled, Navarro's returned, bold, broken open. Then, the shadow, a woman at the bar, mid-40s, sharp bob and sharper eyes. Elena. No, her cousin, Lucia, from Reno, clutching a faded photo. Heard about the show. Elena spoke of you always, before the end. She pressed an envelope into Ivy's hands, letters, final ones, begging reconciliation. Inside, a check, humble but real, from Elena's meager estate. For the home she stole from, Lucia said softly. She regretted everything. Ivy paled, the room spinning. Fraud's ghost, resurrected. Whispers turned to stares as Vargas, of all people, appeared, tipped off, face thunderous. Senora Navarro, we must talk. The old matter. Scandal brewed, flashes popping like gunfire. In the chaos, Ivy froze, fight or flight etched in her stance. Sophia clung to her, I to them both, a human barricade. Not here, I murmured, steering us to a back room, rain-lashed windows framing our standoff. Lucia, kind-eyed, revealed more. Elena had confessed on her deathbed, willed the truth free. No malice, just mending. Vargas grumbled but relented, statute long past, debts drowned in time. For the art, he muttered, pocketing the check with a nod. The gallery exhaled, applause swelling as Ivy took the mic, voice steady, this work, it's not perfection. It's the beautiful wreckage of what we carry. For Elena. For home. We fled after, driving the winding road to Ronda under clearing skies, hands linked across the gearshift. Betrayal's embers cooled to glow, not erased, but alchemized into strength. Winter softened the land, rains greening the olives into promise. The finca stood unyielding, studio reborn with wide windows admitting the world's wild light. Ivy painted with abandon now, canvases of entwined roots, bridges unbroken, while I apprenticed under a local restorer, learning to mend not just metal, but masonry, the villa's bones. Sophia thrived in Seville, weekends bringing her back with tales and tarts, her laughter the glue in our mosaic. Us? Jade and Ivy, we were no fairy tale, but a story handwritten in margins, arguments over burnt toast, lazy siestas under hammocks, midnight drives where Lorca met Dylan in the dashboard glow. Love, we'd learned, wasn't absence of fracture, but the grace to rebuild. Betrayals, Elena's, Ivy's secrets, my doubts, became chapters, not endings, teaching that forgiveness is the truest art. One spring dawn, as mist rose from the gorge like steam from a lover's breath, Ivy proposed, not with rings, but a joint canvas, our hands, paint-smeared, signing the finca's deed as co-owners. Partners, she said, eyes alight. In all the beautiful wreckage. I said yes, wrench in one hand, her heart in the other. Spain, with its olive whispers and cliffside truths, had claimed us, not as drifters, but as roots, deep and defiant. In the end, we didn't fix each other, we simply chose to stay broken open, together. And in that choice, we found home, not in stone or soil, but in the unyielding beat of two lives, synced,